Hi, welcome to Needle Stack. I'm one of your hosts today, AJ Nash, and I'm joined by...
And I'm Robert Vamosi, CISSP.
That's right. And so today we got a really cool episode. We're going to talk about, the gap between OSINT and AI and some very cool things that go along with this. And we're joined by a fantastic guest. He's a good friend of mine because you can't pick better friends, apparently. It's Lance James. He's the founder and chief innovations officer for Unit 221B, which is a firm of unique specialists in the field of information security, cryptography, forensics, legal investigations, law enforcement, and intelligence. He personally leverages his 25 years of experience in security, forensics, malware research, cryptography, counterintelligence, and executive leadership in a whole slew of keynote speeches around the world. He's been featured on MSNBC. He appeared in an episode of one of my favorite shows, Mr. Robot, and he delivered a TED Talk on how attackers can use your brain against you in PsyOps. It's a hell of a resume. Lance, anything you want to add to that before we jump into the discussion today?
No, I think you nailed it. You know?
I was a little overwhelmed by the opening.
I struggle as I age to try to go retroactively into my history. It just seems like so much, and I'm like, so that's great.
Well, and you've got a fun story too. I mean, Lance was a whiz kid child, got in a little bit of trouble like a lot of folks in the hacker world, and then has grown into this amazing career. So, like I said, today we want to talk about AI and OSINT and some of the connections here. But let's start with some basics, Lance. Like when we're talking about OSINT, it's a term that gets used a lot, open source intelligence. But what are we talking about in your mind? Can you describe what you talk about when you say OSINT?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's do some basic traditional glossary stuff. There's all source intelligence, which is, AJ used to work on the NSA side, so you understand this. Essentially, mostly classified type of information. And that has value. I think we all know. But unfortunately, it, stays within the SCIF, stays within those lines, stays on either JWICS, SIP or wherever it is. And it's like in those things, and it is pretty much doesn't touch, anything else. And so you see that more commonly in military intelligence and other type of works. Again, things like this, electronics, and such. And there's this value, obviously, since the internet is like exploded and it's only getting worse. OSINT has become like everything because all your bad actors are using the internet, right? And so OSINT, ironically, might even be more powerful in some aspects, or at least a complementary augmentation to government agencies, because we've seen them adapt to it as well, but also like on the outside to private corporations, commercial entities that do investigations and intelligence and counterintelligence, right? And so I look at it as like the open source. It's the detective work. It's finding out everything you can here. Now, there's two types of OSINT that I kind of look like because it really comes down to mission, right? So there's OSINT they use in like, say, a red team or a pen test where it's like, my mission is to break into your network because you're paying me. And essentially, I need to find out all your, the targets that I'm doing, right? That doesn't really change on the other side of it because, we have two versions of that. We have even that, and then we have like, say, executive profiling. So there's a OSINT that maybe the red team folks use. They use Harvester and other tools and such like that, pulls LinkedIn, things like that. Look for avenues for social engineering or this or that. So that OSINT tends to lead to more offensive operations and goes in that. But there's also the passive like OSINT, which is more, I would say, executive profiling. Is my stuff out there? Things like that. And there's even services that, try to do that. Spiderfoot, things like that, tools. And then there's the OSINT that plays into digital forensics investigations and, and intelligence gathering, which is probably the most common one that we're seeing in our industry, in the sense of, it is useful for identifying or in some attempts to get attribution on threat actors and bad actors, right? So, and then that comes with tools. Even though they say it's open source, it's almost more like internet intelligence is what I would say, because there's tools like EarlScan, VirusTotal. These things, they don't cost money. They're not in the classified all source world, but they're still considered under the OSINT, where a part of your OSINT will also be checking your tools: Spiderfoot, VirusTotal, EarlScan, Shodan, like all of these different tools that you may pay for or not pay for, like Earl Query is free. And so you kind of compile all that stuff, and kind of over time, a lot of good OSINT investigators will have a compiled set of tools and process and playbook that they go through to look up stuff. Now, OSINT varies, right? For instance, we have a few different uses in our world. We do anti-cheat work for some of the gaming companies, right? That was something we kind of fell into, but it's like, it's an important part of the certain mission for gaming companies. And, I'd say the framework concept's the same for the investigation. It's kind of like a detective is a detective, right? But, the information, where they hang out, all of that stuff, the tools you might use, the things that matter. You might have to go to like different sites that have nothing to do with VirusTotal, but more like cheat loading and other type of cheat sites, things like that, or cheat engines, right? So that kind of plays into also like that. And then on the other side, we have normal OSINT where we're just doing an investigation, intelligence, this and that. But it all varies, and it pretty much comes down to frameworks of how do I find, the best I can find people on the internet, is if you want to really dumb it down. And it's, it's classic stalking at its best, basically.
So professional stalking, essentially, whether it's social media, whether it's going through phone books, background checks, but all the way into the digital too. That's interesting. It's a legal form of stalking, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, background check is technically OSINT, isn't it? So yeah.
So it sounds like you're including traditional red teaming stuff of running a Nessus scan, looking for open ports, things like that in your.
No, I'll be very clear that that's not the OSINT part. It's so in many red teams, so social engineering becomes a play, right? So Nessus and Burp and all that stuff are under the vulnerability analysis and assessment tools. I would say OSINT is actually done, usually one in parallel. Right. So Nessus, all that, I'd say service analysis, right? That's actually network and service analysis, right? And OSINT would come in where you might have a team or you might have tools also to be like, who can I target at a level like layer 8, which is not really an official layer, but the human layer. So that when you think of the OSI 7 layer is like that, the layer 8 is like, human, right? And so that's like harvest like all the emails from the execs, or find their sales teams. Like on a red team, one of the best targets is your newest sales guy. They haven't had the security awareness training, and they're eager to get started and prove themselves, right? So they're going to be your best target. So you want to use OSINT to go and find all of the, you pretty much build a map of who works at the company the best you can. And then you start building a strategy around like, all right, let me find also their phone systems. Is it Verizon? Is it, Teams? Is it whatever, blah, blah, blah. And part of that is systems, right? It's like you want to know their systems, but you can find mostly if they use Teams and stuff through OSINT, where it's like someone mentioned it on a board by accident, or something is leaking out of one of their public pieces of information, right? Or, a phone number is out there, and then you go look that up on like reverse CNAM systems and things like that, and you'll get like which provider has it, right? So then you'll, once you start doing this and you classify and getting all the phone numbers, you'll start seeing a pattern like, hey, they're all incremental. That must be the office lines provided that goes into Teams. And then you start literally, without even touching the network, passive. So Nessus and Burp stay away from, they're active. So OSINT is usually extremely passive. You're not doing anything that's touching their network. I've literally had, and this was years ago, like, in the early 2000s, my first company, we had a bank the network guys fought them on politics internally, and all we were allowed to do is do an OSINT test and see what we'd find. We scared the crap out of them, and they they woke up and went farther. But we showed them their entire network, right? What it looks like based on just the internet, right? Not touching a single part of their network, right? And so that's so try to classify OSINT as much more of a passive approach. It's reconnaissance. Essentially, if you put it in the box, it's under the reconnaissance phase.
So now we have a basic understanding of how you define OSINT. We wanted to talk about AI and OSINT, which is something that you've been looking into. Perhaps you could explain. I personally don't like AI because it's language learning models, basically. That's what it is. Am I wrong?
So all of these things are buzzwords, and every little new thing is going to have buzzwords, right? So I think we need to step back and look at the word language before we limit it so much, right? For instance, NVIDIA, I'll start with this, came out with a model called Evo 2. That can literally, it does not speak English. It doesn't speak any of the languages it knows. It speaks DNA. And it can literally like has mapped out the entire, like our entire genome. And this is a world we're not even, I don't even know what that looks like. Right. So it's like, it's not like you're chatting with it and going, hey, da, da, da. And it might, I mean, maybe their Evo 2 also has some language in it so that you can ask its questions and such. But really where the base of that is this language of prediction. It's the ability that we've had, the breakthrough in quote AI, right? Is that we have statistical models that can now, we can feed a bunch of, of our languages at it, right? And it can literally go, I see the pattern and I know what the direction to go and I know now how to pretty much mimic or imitate you or the language you care about or whatever better than in some ways. Not better, faster than we can, right? Because again, it's also the speed really comes from also it's global information. It's we're one human at a time and we've given it billions of humans information, right? If you think about it. And so so in a weird way, it's almost like we've got the speed of a billion humans in a model, right? And when you think about Evo 2, it now can create new species in DNA, theoretical species, and create different forms of life and map out its genome that it could literally invent technically because it has a predictive model of understanding that version of that language. And I wanted to say that because I wanted to step us back of language isn't necessarily what we think like our words are. It could be mathematical. It could be lexical. It could be this. Then there's also images, right? Where we're seeing these multimodal models, which I guess they can still classify under LLMs, but they usually say LLM, multimodal or whatever. And as you've seen, I think ChatGPT just came out with some very impressive, but probably upsetting some people in the Hollywood area, image generation where it can edit like a real photo of you. I made myself an action figure the other day and it was actually pretty cool looking. Or Studio Ghibli's the one that's been like a little bit going on. And obviously I am sure there's going to be some lawsuits come through and go back and forth until they figure out how this works out because you can still trick it. It does try to stop you, but I've even seen it go, sorry, I can't do it because it violates a copyright issue that has nothing to do with copyright because it's just my image. So it might be something in the background that it spots or whatever. And obviously it's very, brand new, right? Which makes me also, so that's image stuff. And then Amazon just officially came out with what they call a large action model. Right. And so LAM is a new term. And of course, we're going to have industry naming these things too, which is agentic AI. Right. Claude is, I would say, the big inventor of this thing. Now, what we have to really, really understand, the real question that is there is, where is AI going? And if you understand the model of like what the future for what vision for OpenAI and Sonnet and Claude and all these things are, essentially it's started with chatbots. We saw that with ChatGPT in like 2022, right? Then it's going into reasoning, which we're seeing them improve these reasoning, sequential thinking, essentially, right? Stepping back. This is good for architecture and planning, right? Research, and then we're seeing now agentic AI has just started hitting the market pretty heftily. Sonnet kind of beat OpenAI to that market real quick and kind of went back there. And if you look at that, Claude is more focused on the software engineer, whereas GPT is the general and it's more focused for general use, right? Fourth is going to be invention. They're going to start looking at like find the missing gaps in things and find ways to fill in that gap. That's their next thing based on OpenAI and Sam Altman's sexual, like a panel he did. And fifth will be organized orchestration, which means that AI can do the work of an entire company or organization. And do all of those things, right? So that's where they're headed, at least OpenAI. I don't have the entire map for Anthropic. They're a little quieter about this stuff in that sense. But like you can see that's kind of the place we're going. So now there's LAMs, right? We're literally in the agentic area, right? So it's not just language anymore. It's like there's action that can be taken. I think Amazon's Nova that they just announced has an SDK for developers to build task orchestration for, looking up flowers on the internet. I was playing with the other day a thing called Open Manus, which is a Chinese, I'm going to say that now, it's a Chinese open source tool, which you can get on GitHub. So you can look at the code, and it's like very clever and does browser operation. We are very much in the burgeoning beginning of browser operation because it's kind of slow and expensive right now. But it's like, it did a smart one where it's actually like labeling each section of the page to a number and an index so that Sonnet can understand it, like Claude Sonnet can understand it better and more accurately, whereas Claude has a version, but it's not perfectly accurate as well. So these are like attempts, I think, and then OpenAI just came out with Operator, which you have to go under their $200 a month plan to have a browser. But all of this can be done also locally. So there's always these, everybody's playing with both the open source and then there's these commercial versions. But I would say it's not limited to language. I would say the breakthrough is because it can predict statistically any language you give it. So if it's cancer cells, if it's, protein, folding, if it's mathematics, if it's coding, if it's Korean, it's going to speak it like really well. I used OpenAI to talk to someone in Saudi Arabia. And I show my friend like a communication. He goes, I can hear your voice in that, in that language. And he speaks Arabic, right? So it was like, he's like, it's weird. I can actually hear your tone and like that. So it does a really good job at language too. So I'm curious of why you don't like AI though.
I'm just saying that it's not reasoning. And I think it's kind of a misnomer to jump to AI when it's pattern matching, as we agree. It's learning models, which I agree. And I would think that would map pretty cleanly to like an OSINT investigation, particularly like in collection.
Yeah, I do want to pause you there, though. I want to know what you think AI would be defined as.
I guess fully reasoning on its own, having enough common sense baked in that it can infer and make creative leaps that are accurate. And we see hallucinations, we see attempts, but I don't actually see that today. So I think it's a bit premature to call it AI.
I mean, it could also just be AI 0.1, right? There is like, I would say segments of it have some great things. For instance, I had it deep reason on the energy market for AI and where it's headed to, right? So as if I was an investor, right? And I asked it like, are we going to always be like, because there's this DeepSeek is a big breakdown, right? DeepSeek versus OpenAI, and it's really apples and Androids when you think about like how this all works. But that's a distillery model. It's not the same. It all comes from the Llama base. What really it is Meta versus OpenAI and Claude. Like that's like that thing, because Meta is taking the open source route, right? And you can. But yeah, so let's go back to pattern matching. To be continued on debating on AI at some other point. So I think this is still the burgeoning of AI, though. I think we're going to get there, and I think we can all agree to that. That's just like we're in the breakthrough moments. We're finally getting this pattern matching, and insecurity and OSINT and all of the stuff. You think it's going to be pretty awesome. I've been quietly working on a automated agentic red team versus blue team CTF system to see who's going to win and see how a blue teams adapt to kind of study itself and see why we always lose in the blue teams and see if it can actually learn and stuff. And we'll see if it can actually do that. It'll test this reasoning perspective, right? So, and it does make mistakes. But as we go back to pattern matching and OSINT, I think the biggest challenge is delivery in OSINT, right? It's not just the work. It's like, every human starts out in the work. They have their notepad. They start writing their stuff. They put together, they do their search online. They do this, they do that. And they go to do, and then they have their notes. And then it's like, well, maybe someone wants an actual OSINT report or a delivery and this and that. And ironically, writing is the harder part. Right. And I think we can agree that since it is a large language model, writing is probably one of the parts that will be very great for us because it can fill in the gaps and do such based on our notes. Right. It's a transformer. If we really look at it, what it really is, it's just a transformer. Take CSV, make it JSON. Take my shorthand, make it long term into an email. I don't know why we don't just send each other bullet points, because that's what we're all secretly doing. Is just like, give me the bullet points of this damn email. So, Just search it. I'm going to just send you bullet points. You don't have to use your AI on your end. So, but yeah, it's a transformer. And the neat thing about it is the transformer is how transformers work is they're designed to pick up patterns, right? And they have search capabilities underneath and stuff. So what's really good about that, especially now when we're getting much better and it's picking up deeper patterns and such, is OSINT has become a great thing. And then the agentic capabilities. So there's a company called Perplexity AI out there that is well known for, it's the search engine for, it's an AI search engine, right? So, and that's actually, and they've got an API, right? And they have also a desktop just like Claude and Chat. And they all have both, front ends for people that are not developers or big into all that stuff. And then they have the back end ones for people that want to get a little creative. And Perplexity AI has become a very interesting tool for the ability to do OSINT with. You can obviously also do RAG systems, retrieval augmented generation. That's what Perplexity AI is. Essentially, is a scraper hooked into LLM on, so, and it has a vector database in the middle, right? And so, so when you say search something, it can quickly go and do the cosine similarity, find that section, get that information. If it's cached and it needs new, it can grab that real quick and then it feeds it back in. That's pretty much how their entire system works. Of course, it's scale. It's like a lot of systems, right? So, and that was came out, that kind of ability came out with tools like LangChain in 2022 and 3, where people were already looking at agents and vectors and how to connect all your data together, right? And so OSINT is really the art of you have someone sequentially doing physical data checks and tool checks and this and that, writing notes and then this. And it's like a process. So I'm like, hey, when's that OSINT report? Oh, it'll take about a week, right? So I was at I'm actually going to do the Disruption Conference next week, but I was also at a conference in Athens, and I was doing a 3-hour lab on OSINT, Defer, and agentic AI. And we actually built things together, and we put URL scan, virus total, we put the perplexity key in, we put in open routers so that we could have different models play around with it. The open router, just for everybody in the audience who doesn't know, it's you can pretty much get an API key and then just list models that you want to try. It's kind of good for experimental plus normal. So it has Sonnet all the way down to some free llama things that are still just kind of getting worked out, right? So, but essentially it allows you to have a quick drop down of hundreds of models, right? And so, and it's one key, so you don't have to go and get an OpenAI key and this and that key, right? And so, and it's today's agentic world is kind of in these VS Code based systems, because VS Code was now made open source, and then people are modifying them. Cursor has one. I think was it called Surfwind has one, or Windsurf has one, and then VS Code has the GitHub Copilot, but it does some editing, but it doesn't do agentic just yet. They're going to jump on that bandwagon very shortly. And then you can add extensions from VS Code, like RuCode, Client, things like that. And these are all clients for doing computer tool use, is what Claude calls it. It's tool use, right? So now that we've had that, we were in this room, we put all these tools together. There's an extra piece to this that Anthropic invented called Model Context Protocol. It is connect your LLM or your chat, your client, right, to to an MCP server that then goes to URL scan or virus total or this, and we'll make the call and then pass it back. So its job is to play a middle area that's supposed to be secure. It's not perfect, but they're supposed to be secure. And then it'll grab down to even something as basic as a personal assistant. Check my Gmail. The MCP server will get called. It'll go get your email, pass it back to the LLM, sort through, do stuff, and then the chatbot will say, this is your email today. Here's your summary or whatever you want from it, right? So it allows you to pretty much use agentic tools, and it's a middle server that allows you to connect local data, URL scan, this and that. And so you'll have these MCP servers, and you can go to places like mcphub.io, and they'll have a ton for different things. Slack, right? All these kind of fun things, especially if you're a developer, right? Let this person know I just finished this PR if you're inside of VS Code, and you can literally chat that out and then it's done, right? Give them the change log because you literally were in the code. So, and so it literally makes it so you don't have to leave the environment, which is kind of awesome, right? So let's go to OSINT, right? So we have Virus Total, Earl Scan. We got this Shodan set up. We have Spiderfoot API set up. We have LinkedIn developers so that we can look up people on LinkedIn, right? We have Perplexity in there. We have all of the tools that we per se that have APIs, Earl Query, all of these different lists of tools that we usually use on a daily basis, pressing the button, right? So then I say to, AI today, and I say, hey, and here's another piece. You can make custom modes in agentic AI. So you can say, hey, add a custom mode that is for digital forensics, intelligence, and IR, right? And it will, the good news about these things is it knows the frameworks. So it will be like, all right, do you want to keep chain of custody? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this, right? So I have one for red teaming. I have one for OSINT. I have it's different ones, right? One I just call a researcher. And you tell it system prompts, custom system prompts that say your job is to go online and use these sets of tools, and you tell it about the tools. And, the cool thing is you can ask AI to create this thing for you and then just, caveat it up and things. And then the next thing you know, it's in there. And essentially, I showed a class and they all did it themselves. And we ran it. I said, give me a domain that's hit bad yesterday or today that you guys are investigating. And it was some domain or whatever. We looked it up. It went, did Earl Scan, did Shodan, did this, did that. Used the Pandoc MCP setup because we made one. And it essentially made a docx and then PDF file with the logo of a full OSINT report. We then popped it up on the screen, and someone from Microsoft was like, this is better than even some of our, investigators' reports. And it did it in less than 5 minutes. Right. And so So is it performing the analysis?
Yes. Or is it just giving you a feedback of what it's found in terms of collecting?
It's doing it all. So if you do a custom prompt and say, do OSINT, it will include the process of it, which is first use the tools, get the data. Then it'll do an analysis. And so the cool thing about pattern matching systems, specifically this great pattern matching system, is that it literally understands it. It's like weird because that's why it's like, I can't say it's just limited to it being pattern matching system. It has a sense of understanding. So it takes a framework and says, I'm going to pattern match it based on what is expected in your forensics. That's why system prompts are so powerful, right? So, and so that is like, I'm going to follow this, and then I'm going to transform this, and I'm going to do this. So literally, we even had a rabbit hole question that came out when we did this report, right? They said, well, can we see the infrastructure changes over the time? So it went to domain tools on its own. Once we asked that question, grabbed that, got the history, said it used to be on this system. Now it's on Cloudflare here. And on its own, without even asking it the first time, it went and analyzed the website and told us the actors involved, the type of website it was, and gave us a risk rating. Right. So it was, and it's, I was telling someone the other day in our office that that was former FBI as an investigator for a company. I was telling them about it, and then they're also going to this conference. I said, "You got to stop." And they're like, "I really need something to speed up our OSINT. We just need to get this managed and stuff." So I'm like, "Well, agentic AI has been really pushed to the engineer types, but red teams." And OSINT and Defer, I've used it in an RIR engagement when I didn't have enough teams to do the live and they were in a hurry with a ransomware rescue. We got to write PowerShell scripts to an agile environment that needs to scan across 72 systems, right? It's even scares me is I did some digital forensic with it where I had to be on a box that got around an EDR, which I won't name which one, but a very good one. And I'm like, I need you to be silent on this because we have to pretty much image the box live so that this, is an insider threat issue. Right. Mm-hmm. So and I'm like, I need to do this. Right. And it said, okay, I'll write the whole thing in shell script. Right. Using the language, cause we couldn't load Python. The core images didn't have any of these developer tools on it. Wrote the whole thing, never was detected, literally sent things to a C2, S3. And was able to do this stuff. So OSINT, you can even create new tools with it, right? And that's the thing. It's if a tool does not work for you or you need something, you can literally be in some of these clients say, I need you to add me an MCP tool that does this, right? So say you find like, this is deeper OSINT, this is more offensive, so we go away from the stuff, but there are people that do malware investigations that have find holes in vulnerabilities in some of the malware, and they can kind of hook in, they check with their lawyers, get it approved, blah, blah, blah. But that's been a common maneuver. I've done this for years. You know, we go through and say, hey, technically this is not violating the law because it's on a read, write, world readable thing. So you're going to have agile, tracking, and there's not like a tool out there. So also in the OSINT, as you're moving along, especially on the more technical OSINT, not just that, you want to like siphon the data theft they're getting, or I want to like look up Telegram bot tokens, or I want to like in Shodan or Earl Query, I can go add a tool. Here's what bot tokens look like. It'll go do it. And then like 15 minutes later, now I have a new MCP tool that goes to Shodan and specifically searches their API for just the bot tokens for the day. And I'm like, all right, add a tool that will give me a CSV file of like the countries and the information about that. And then what's even crazier is, let's go back to like some Claude desktop. You all used the Claude desktop before? Like it's kind of like ChatGPT, right? So they've got all their fancy things where they do like graphs and stuff that they can do on the fly, like mermaid graphs, right? So I set up an MCP system for both the Perplexity engine, right? And then I did an MCP to some of our data sets for bad guy stuff, right? I'm not going to get into detail. I'm not here to sell anything, but like essentially for our data sets that we look at internally. And I'm on the remote desktop, the Claude desktop, like the standard one that's like all pretty. And I'm like, hey, I need you to look into this, like, Telegram channel, like, and tell me everything about it. And it's like, gives me a full threat intelligence report. And then he goes, would you like me to make a social network analysis graph about it? I'm like, yes, since you're volunteering, please do. Right. Like, it did. It literally in real time. Like when you think about it, you don't need a front end tool anymore. You just need something to chat to that can interpret data. And so I was thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the Palantirs and the Multigas and all the, where it's like a kind of a workstation, right? The Claude or this can become your investigative workstation in OSINT or investigations these days. And it literally like will create a report for you or create like topic models for you, because it's like, it is like you said, pattern matching system. So it will analyze, and then it'll go, okay, let me get deeper into this. I'll be like, who's this person? And it'll give me their OPSEC like status, like are they knowledgeable of it, what motivates them, their TTPs down to their language, like they use like provocative terms, right? Because this is all chatter, not like necessarily technical TTPs, right? So it's almost like, it's kind of crazy because it's more like the intelligence stuff you'd see more inside at the government level, that they're collecting like how to psyops a person or how to like mess with them, and it will analyze their language. I'll even be like, English is first language, second language, third language, and it'll do a confidence report on this based on the analysis of the linguistics. And you're just like,
yeah. So hang on a second. So far, what I've heard is like AI isn't just pattern matching. It isn't just models. It's moving past derivative into actual creative. It's going to replace everybody clearly with this agentic AI that you're talking about. Now we're going to have a hard time keeping jobs. So I mean, you're scaring the hell out of me, but. Just moving ahead from that point, though, like, what are you? And you've already started hinting a lot about this, but I want to dig more into it. So, you specifically, you and your organization, what are you guys doing in terms of OSINT? Using AI on your OSINT work. I know the work that you guys do at Unit 221B. A lot of it is OSINT related, right? It's a lot of research work. So, what are you using? Are you using agentic for some of this stuff? You already hinted a little bit at it. What are the advantages you're getting out of AI support to OSINT, and what are the risks or the disadvantages? The QCing and are you getting in a position where maybe you trust the AI too much, or do you worry others will do that because humans by nature get a little lazy, and if the thing will do it for them and we can just ship it forward, why don't we do that? So how are you balancing all that out with these technologies?
So that's a great question. And I will say that it started as a pendulum at first. I am probably the big proponent of like doing all of this investigation for where we want to go with AI, right? So chief, that's kind of my role. And actually I run the engineering team. So there's a line here. I will totally own this. I knocked down production system playing with it the first time, right? I got excited on a weekend, thought, oh, I could solve a problem that we haven't solved in a while and blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, system's down. Right, for the weekend. That was me, right? And I owned it because it was like, because again, this is very early, right? It is very powerful. And I probably have spent like the last 6 months learning the agentic stuff at a deep level. Because what's weird about it is I'll be making ways to like keep it on task, making it, and then the developers of like the tools that I use will then update their stuff to also do the same thing. So we're all on the same path, right? Because we're all struggling with, we need this to like think smaller. Sometimes it gets, so your biggest challenge, tokens, right? There's token limits, which then get into almost like peripheral vision and memory problems, right? There are solutions where you condense memory and do what's called a context window that slides and stuff, but it will forget bigger projects unless, and Gemini only just came out with something that's starting to like toe the line, even if with their 2 million tokens that actually might be able to be good for tool use. It's still to be determined because it only came out like in beta right now. So internally, I've been playing with it for like the agentic perspective for like 6 months. And I made all the mistakes, which is why I also wanted to give a lab on this stuff going, here's my mistakes. Here's the things that do work. Here's the things that don't. And we have to know that because there are limits, right? And it does sound scary. It does sound like, it's going to take over. And then in 10 years, we're going to have robot wars instead of real wars. And then we'll just watch them on TV and there'll be score points. And then, whoever wins in 3 days gets more tariffs, whatever. But like essentially, that might be our future. I mean, I really do. I guess I'm excited because we are finally in like the Star Trek, Star Wars future, right? We are literally on our iPads, which is like the Surface, like from TNG in the 90s to computer, like Jarvis's and stuff, right? And it's pretty crazy, right? Robots are real. It's like, we just started on it. Can a robot handle a group conversation? Probably not yet, but it could probably do one-to-one, no problem.
Yeah, my concern though with that future is a future where, like in if you want to go in the Star Trek world, right? Data, right, was a fully autonomous.
Keeps getting compromised, didn't he? Getting compromised.
He did, but the other issue is when he wasn't being compromised. Obviously, he could certainly replace a person. Though what didn't exist in that sci-fi future appears at least was capitalism.
It's a utopian world.
Right? So in a capitalist future, he isn't the only, Data isn't the only robot on that ship. Everybody on that ship is a robot because then you don't have to feed them or clothe them and they don't have to sleep and there's all these other things that go with it. So I worry that may be where we head. It's not a utopian future, but a future where profit has a lot to do with how these things get used, which also leads back into the discussion about leaning too heavily on it and trusting it too much, because I think there's a risk reward factor there. And when capitalism runs amok, not that I have a problem with capitalism, I live in a capitalist society, but when it runs amok, it's, well, let's take those risks. We'll roll the dice because, we're going to cut millions of dollars in overhead and we'll just see what happens. And so I think we're going to need some changes in how we manage these things, or how we think about, being dependent on these things. And I fear we're running really fast in that direction.
We're running too fast. It's worse than the Wi-Fi one with the web problem, right? So, we're running we are running a bit fast. I'm not going to lie. I actually just came out with an open source project on LinkedIn and on GitHub called Private AI. I was trying to make a little bit of a pun, but it's a proxy that you would put on your agentic AI or even ChatGPT or any of your stuff that will transform any PII type of data, company names, everything, into a fake version of that same format so that, one, it doesn't confuse the AI, so it will continue. So locally, you still see everything, but it'll detect keys. It'll detect anything that should be a secret and not should be like, because if I do a red team and the company's like a little bit like they want to keep that quiet, right, that I'm doing a red team, and usually they do, like, they don't want me sending all their data up to AI, right? Like these, so, and getting an on-prem to do this properly, we're still a little bit out because it's 4090s can only do so much on a desktop computer. And again, it's like the crypto wars where the open source was coming a little behind and then it finally kind of started working itself out. We're still in the coming a little behind thing, right? They're the research and then you have the big corporations, right? And so the capitalist perspectives. So the challenge is, and Microsoft just came out with a report on this, that if you over rely on it, it does affect your critical thinking capabilities. You do become lazy, right? And there is this line between letting it do that. Also, I was talking to Ben April, who's the CTO of Multigo, and him and I have some great conversations about AI. He's a skeptic, which is good, right? So, and he wrote the 6 Commandments of AI. And one of them was like, it's still a tool. Everything that goes in and out of it, you're responsible for, right? And then the second one was also, don't use it if you don't understand how to do it yourself.
Well, that'd be everybody almost.
That's
everybody,
right?
The
rule. If I cannot write that code, because like where I use AI personally is on things that I just meant to get to and I knew I was going to write, but I can't because it takes too long because I have other things going on. So I can then go and review that code like a normal pull request, look through that code. And I run an engineering team. So running an AI engineering team is like being a manager that says, I need this, this, and this. So for me, that makes sense. It's the same as if you're going to go do quantum physics and AI and you don't know crap about quantum physics. There's no point. Right? You got to still know how to drive the quantum physics. It's going to be the same with the EVO2 stuff. The people do the DNA stuff. It's the only people going to understand how to use that for themselves. It will speed up. And that's, I think, the whole point. Speeds up as a tool, the capabilities for us to get to places. Yes. And the agentic is a valid concern. I literally was talking to a father-son engineer set 6 months ago in an Aikido seminar, and they both are software engineers. And I said, what do you guys think of AI? Right? Oh, it's too expensive. It's never going to like never going to the engineers. Since they were black belts, I kept my mouth shut. I'm still a beginner. And we have it's a very traditional Japanese setup here. So, for Aikido, but like, I was like, okay. And then I'm seeing this stuff pop out like 2 weeks later. And I'm just like, I wonder if I ask them that same question the next time I see them. Right. So like, I might change some things because, there has been a lot of things I've been able to get done for less than $5 that I've been waiting to sit down and get done at work finally, right? Like our alerting system, it needed a redo. It needed proper routing. There was all this stuff. I had a huge product requirement for it. And, we've been busy doing a lot of stuff, right? Like I'd say we're boutique, but, fast growing, right? So like, but that means I'm doing a lot of jobs and other people are doing a lot of jobs, right? And so, when the agentic capabilities came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to still babysit it. It's still my time too, right? It might be my time and then $25 of tokens, right? To get it done. Because I'm still driving what I need done, this and that, especially when this was done, actually it was 3.5, 3.7 is much better. And then the clients are already getting much better already too. And so the challenge is that you have to balance it. Because like I said, I broke things with it. And then I've also fixed things with it, right? Also, backup. You need to have a custom mode that will automatically back up stuff before you even get started. It is worse than ransomware. It will overwrite your stuff. Oh, no. And it will write new code instead of and stuff. And they started just adding checkpoints on the client side, things like that. But get, all that revisioning, everything like that has to be ready. You got to be ready to first thing you need to do is back up everything I have, all my configs, all this stuff. I've seen it literally accidentally overwrite stuff constantly where I'm like, dude, all my configs are gone. What the heck did you just do? Right. So I've sworn at this thing. It's a thing. We have it, I switched to voice now that I talk to him. I'll be like pressing and I'm like, what are you doing? No. But yeah, so to answer your question, right? Yeah, it's a complicated relationship. Okay. It's like pairing. It's like having a small team. And also one funny thing I've learned is when you do a product requirement with it and it helps you organize that, it'll be like week 1, phase this, week 2. And I'm like, you mean 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. AI has no idea of AI time. It only has the idea of human time because of the way it was trained. So I'm laughing because I'm like, you mean you got 7 weeks done in an hour? So it's pretty intense. But so at work, right? So I've been, one of the ones actually was a Telegram bot token from Shodan. Right. And we did it while I was in the meeting with the person. I was like, what do you need? Okay, let's type it in. And I showed him this and sent him the code afterwards. He goes, oh my God, this is great. And then 10 minutes later, here's your code. Right. You know what I mean? So for fast scripts, things we need to be agile with, I think you can safely say that can be good. Complex products. Sometimes I find that Sonnet 3.7 is a little too complex. So actually trick is really getting it to code to be a little more simple. Sometimes that's why they're starting to do task orchestration, but sometimes, it just, it'll go off and I'm like, I didn't need this big web page. I needed I needed a simple product. Right. So it's like like Sonnet brags itself on complexity, which is good, you know. I think where it really kind of plays well into is pull requests, right? So it'll be a third eye on a pull request. You check the pull request of one of your engineers, and you know, you make sure you get it, and then it'll also look at your review and it's on the review, and you can make sure it didn't miss anything. Like, hey, by the way, you could put this here, or maybe a global decorator here would actually be more efficient, or things like that. So you can do things like, hey, am I missing anything from my PR? And it'll like, you know, and oh, this is actually good. It's, you know, and it can read your comment. It can do this and stuff. DevOps, pretty powerful, right? So sometimes I run out of disk space. So I finally got a new M4 instead of the M2 2022, but I was a power user, right? Disk space on a box or this or that. I can like send in Claude Code, which is a command line one, and go, hey, just find out what's causing the disk space, clear out all the cache, does this. And by the time I get back, it's done. Like, so it's not any different than like a tool like Daisy Disk or anything like that, right? But it's almost like sending out a robot to do it, you know? So yeah.
From an OSINT standpoint, right? So like pulling it back into the conversation, because I mean, listen, this is obviously a dynamic topic. There's a lot of different models to this. There's a lot of different tools. I mean, you've you know given us a whole fire hose of information on the subject, but from the OSINT standpoint itself, it sounds like, you know, what you're saying is the ability to, as we leap towards this agentic AI, is, as you said at the beginning here, most people who do OSINT, most people who do research, they have a set of tools and processes. We all have them. Hey, I'm going to go to this website. I'm going to go to this website. I'm going to go to this tool. I'm going to use this. I'm going to do these things. You know, I'm going to build this profile. Every time you're going to build a profile, or whether you're doing social engineering or whatever it might be, there's a whole process that most people have, even if they haven't even documented it out well. They've got tools and techniques and processes. And what I'm hearing you say is, as agentic is maturing, we're going to be able to not just write the language of how we want to do these things and the reports at the end, but we're going to be able to use maybe even the LLMs, but we're going to be able to tell agentic to do all the things we normally do, right? And so then the tool can go out, the bot goes out and does all it. So you're doing that now, is what you're saying. You've built basically a bigger team as a result.
Yeah, you reminded me of one I just did as OSINT. It's an OSINT for a red team, though. So it's not like, you know, but it's still the passive OSINT, right? I did not have an extra staff or someone to help me with the part of the phishing exercise of a pen test we were doing, right? Setting up GoFish, all the, you know, stuff like this. And there was two sides of it. I needed to do, like, there was some OSINT done on our side, obviously, for us, and that was great. But then I was like, take that OSINT and then do some extra stuff and learn about this, and then come up with a strategy for, like, you know, like, give me 5 different strategies for, you know, phishing these people, right? You know, they're pretty secure. Like, they have all these like certain systems and training systems and all this stuff. So we actually decided to attack the training system, actually. So, you know, the thing that teaches them not to fish, you know, or to click on a fish, right? Which worked pretty well. But like, that was one of the strategies that helped, because there was like a few. I mean, one was way too complicated. I'm like, I don't have time for that, and they're not paying enough, right? And then the other ones is that's this. So I had it not only like do like one, confirm OSINT, do a deep research mode, check the stuff, and get it even farther. And then I had it go down and get more phone numbers, like cell phones and all the SMS stuff I needed, right? And so it did that, and then I validated it with each thing, because I told it to give me site link of everything that it pulled from. And then I was like, set me up, GoFish, set me up this, let's do the campaign, make the HTML, let's do this, because I had a lot of other things to do while I have to squeeze this in. So it was like one of those moments where it's just like, this stuff saved my butt, actually, you know? And so it was kind of like, and that was like, and I have tools now that do like that, OSINT stuff. I did a test of an OSINT. I think it was a bank that got breached or like got announced that it got breached in February, right? It was like from 2 years ago, some insider or whatever. And there was a Twitter picture. I literally handed it. I had my OSINT mode on. So there's a custom already prepared OSINT mode in Agentic AI that I set up. And I gave it the picture, because you can hand it an image, and it said, go get me everything on this. It went even too far and got me all the execs that are in LinkedIn from that bank. I'm like, that's not the kind of thing I need, but I need to like find all this other stuff. So it's like one of the things I think OpenAI and all of them push is market research, is really good at market research. Well, market research isn't any different than OSINT. It's just a different set of tools. It's the idea of going online and doing research and getting everything and going down the rabbit hole and getting all the things and using a tool and getting all the information, right? So with MCPs, you could also plug it into Multigo, and then it can like get that information, right? So if you already have like that, right? So I saw one that plugs in a Ghidra for reverse engineering, and AI is now just automatically controlling your Ghidra and doing reverse engineering, right? So like, and all of this is just intelligence gathering, right? You know, and so it's like, I guess it's one of the best things it's good for is reconnaissance, right? Agentic reconnaissance. It's like a drone, just for, you know, like satellite drones that are like just for getting pictures before you go make an action. And so it's really good. I wouldn't trust it to like red team on its own, or, you know, without like the big approval button and like but I might say, write me the POC for this and like, you know, try that out for the exploit I might want to try on the box, right? You know, things like that. But for reconnaissance, since it's such a passive effort, it's a very safe effort, and it's one of the most lucrative for adapting to OSINT, things like that. And you can really speed up your work.
That's an interesting comparison. You talk about, you know, drones for reconnaissance, you know, in the battlefield, right? They set a drone out ahead, it'll do some looking, it can pull some things in, but you don't ask the drone to actually analyze the battlefield and give you, you know, where you should go next, et cetera. And that's a really interesting concept of being able to do the same thing here with agentic AI as sort of your drone to go out and pull things back and do this recon for you. I mean, it's fascinating. Listen, we could probably talk about this for hours and hours, but nobody's going to listen for hours and hours, so we should probably wrap it up at this point. But it's been a fascinating topic and a very interesting discussion, Robert.
Yeah. Thank you, Lance, for being on the show. And I particularly like your point about layer 8 of the OSI model being the human layer. It's accurate, very accurate.
Yeah. I've stolen that. I've heard that over the years. It's not mine. So
nonetheless, you introduced it into the conversation, and I think it's appropriate. So thank you for that. You can find more about Lance and where to find him in our show notes. And thanks to the audience for returning. It's without you, we wouldn't have a show. So thank you very much for that. So be sure to let us know your thoughts on social media. We're everywhere. Look for us at NeedleStackPod, and wherever you're listening, subscribe, because that's also very important. And, you know, we look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye.